Okay, Shalom Akim, Kohalalem La Yahaba Shem Yahshaba Shem Hakudash, and double honors to the great Muslim apostles and Yara Tazar that you find this video edifying and exhorting. And to edify means to build up, to exhort means to encourage. And Thadiyah Shah for the strength in order to make this video. And Yara Tazar, once more, we're going to get into the Native American history book. Yeah, as you can see here, by Captivating History. I generally forgot what part it is, but Yara Tazar, I'm put the part number after I upload this. So, whatever part this is, I think it's like part 9 or 10 maybe, but we'll see. Point is, right now we're going to focus more so on Reuben, from what I can extract from this chapter here. So this is chapter 14 called the Seminole Wars. Page 87 for reference. Once more, before I see it here. Chapter 14, the Seminole Wars. Page 87, but I'm gonna get to the point. Because thing is, compared to, in fact, let me just read this, then I'm gonna make some points as I'm reading. So again, Native American Indian book, the Seminole Wars, chapter 14. It says the Seminoles were a very different people than most of the Native Americans who lived along the East Coast. And there's a reason for that, because of course each of the tribes have their own attribute, which I'm going to get a precept on Reuben soon. But before I get that one out, I just want to do some reading. Because Reuben, of course, as I mentioned in the other Native American history videos on the playlist, I should actually make a playlist here after I make this one. But the point is that the Seminole Indians are Reuben. The thing is, yeah, you can consider them as Native Americans as well, but they're really like a subsect, a section within the Native American Indians. But realistically, going back to the tribes, the 12 tribes, of Israel, Reuben are the Seminole Indians, and then you can see Gad as the rest of the Native American Indians. You could tell just from their fighting spirit as well. The power that Yahweh Hashem blessed them with. Which I'm going to get to that precept soon. So this is... Alright, continuing on. It says, based on recent finds, the people have resided in Florida for over 14,000 years. Now, of course, this is according to Esau's research. So, got to take it with a grain of salt there in terms of the timeline. Now, giving them an extensive history that is unimaginable to Americans whose country is less than 300 years old. I remember, obviously, it's 2025. 2026, that's when Trump's going to do that semi-quincentennial something. Semi-quintessential celebration, which is half of 500. That's 250. So of course it will be 250 years until from when United States was declared as its own nation. Because 1776, that's when they declared the Americans declared it as independence. After, which was within that period of time and that's why they called the war during that period of time the War of Independence, specifically for the settlers to claim the lands over there. Anyways, we'll get to that though. So first, the Europeans to encounter... Checking if I got my phone just in case if I need to get an article. I'll get it whenever. But yeah, it says it, the first Europeans to encounter the tribes that became known as the Seminole Nation were the Spanish, who had already established genocide as their chosen method for dealing with people of the North and South America, who did not want the Spanish on their lands. The Seminoles, because of course, it's not just North America, but you got South America, where you got predominantly the Latin tribes. You can get into the Aztec history, the Inca history as well. Those are certain tribes. I think the Aztecs are Mexicans, Issachar, and then the Inca tribe. I forgot who they are, but the point is they're one of the Latin tribes. I think they're Peruvians or something. But anyways, Yaratazar, I'm gonna do another history lesson based on the Latin American tribes too. So, continuing on, it says dealing with the people of North. So they use genocide as their chosen method for dealing with the people of North and South America who did not want the Spanish on their lands. The Seminoles are generally thought of as being more hostile than the other Native American tribes. Yeah, because they were a whole other tribe in amongst the tribe of Israel. Because the Seminoles weren't just Native American Indians; they were Reubenites, man. The rest of the Native American Indians is Gad. They had their own traits as well. But Reuben, they're known for that that excellency of power. Just on that point, I said I was going to bring it out. So Genesis 49 and I'll start with verse 3. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. So yeah, Reuben is known as the top of power, top of dignity, honor, strength. They're the root, they're the foundation of the strength of Israel. That's why they're known as the warriors, of the 12 tribes. So as you can see here, it says the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. That's why it was a hard task for Edomites to claim Reuben's lands. It was very hard. They had to go through 3 wars, man. The first Seminole War, which we'll get a little bit into, the second, and then the third as well. So yeah, man, it was a tough battle for Esau, man. It was a tough battle for Esau. Despite having the blessing of the sword, it was a tough battle for Esau. The Seminoles are generally thought of as being more hostile than other Native American tribes along the eastern coast of North America, but it is possible that this incredibly horrible first impression of Europeans made the people extremely wary of any Europeans. They were understandably defensive of the place where they had lived for literally thousands of years. So, on to the next part. It says the Spanish lose Florida again. Spain had limited involvement in the American Revolution. As an ally of France, they assisted and helped the colonists fight against England as they had laid claim to Florida. They assisted the future Americans from the South when the treaty was drawn up to end the conflict known as the War of Independence, which that happened between around 1773. I'll double check, but 1773 to about 1783, and of course independence was actually declared in 1776. And then let me just get the research on that. Guys, so I just checked it. It says here in the AI overview, the American War of Independence lasted from 1775 to 1783. So 1775 to 1783. So, it wasn't 1773, it was 1775 at the beginning, and then it ended 1783. And of course, a year after the war began, the Americans then established themselves as independent from the British handlers, I should call them. So that's the War of Independence. It's basically just Esau against Esau, Edomites against Edomites. The birth of America. Eh? So this is continuing on, in terms of Spanish claiming Florida. So I read it. This is you can also, the War of Independence, you can also call it the American Revolution as well. So Spain had limited involvement in the American Revolution as an ally of France. They assisted and helped the colonists fight against England, as they had laid claim to Florida, they assisted the future Americans from the South. When the treaty was drawn up to end the conflict known as the War of Independence, the Spanish kept Florida. The problem was that Florida was a highly desirable property, and the Americans were far more interested in taking it from the Spanish than in being grateful for the assistance that the Spanish had provided during the American Revolution. Which was a series of events there. So which of course the War of Independence was actually part of the American Revolution. That might be a whole video in itself, it probably is. So you have to in the future, I'll consider doing it. Or, one thing after the other. So Spain recognized the danger with this new variable of a country just north of their lands, and they encouraged settlements along the shared boundary. People from Spain and the new country were encouraged to settle, which was a mistake that the Mexicans did not learn from when they'd invited Americans to help them settle. So, Jake and where it says when they invited Americans to help them settle Texas, Jake and their compassionate spirit, they didn't apply of course, the scripture, never trust thine enemy in Sirach chapter 12 and 10. So of course they got the consequences of letting Edomites, settle in their lands, which of course Most High made them do it, as I've been repeating throughout the series. It's part of the curses for Edomites, a nation of whom you will not know, to come and conquer us, over there in the land of Gad, Reuben, and the northern tribe. So prior to it becoming America. Alright, so however, after more than a century of learning that the Seminole could not be removed as easily as the native peoples of other regions. Remember, Genesis 49 and verse 3, Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power. You see? In fact, let me get that in the NLT as well, so that I can, the New Living Translation, it keeps it in, I guess you could say modern English, but just for clarity. Alright, so Genesis 49 and verse 3. Genesis 49 and verse 3. In the NLT New Living Translation, Reuben, you are my firstborn, my strength, the child of my vigorous youth. You are my first in rank and first in power. So, of course, Reuben's known for that power, man, being the pinnacle of excellency, as it reads in the KJV, as it's referred to in the King James Version. That's why it was a hard fight for them. So it says, perhaps the Spanish, however, after more than a century of learning that the Seminole could not be removed as easily as the native peoples of other regions, the Spanish seem to have established a slightly better relationship with them. Perhaps the Spanish felt a sense of respect for the Seminoles, as by this point the Spanish encouraged the natives to establish farms and settlements along the border. It is likely that they saw the Seminole as being a barrier to dissuade Americans from trying to take Florida, as if to irk the Americans, which irk means to weary, to weaken, to weaken something or someone. That's what irk means, I-R-K, irk. So as if to irk the Americans, the Spanish refused. So pretty much the Spanish tried to use, the Seminole Indians to be like not a buffer, but, as a way to weaken the American settlers. So the Spanish refused to return escaped slaves who reached their lands, and they were absorbed into the growth of Florida and often worked alongside the Seminole, who saw them as being in a similar situation as themselves and accepted them into their tribe. Alright, so England had ruled Florida for a time prior to the War of Independence. During that time, they had encouraged the Seminoles to fight back against the colonists, who continued to push into the Seminole territory. By the time Spain gained control of Florida, the Seminole already had established a very combative relationship with the new country. So of course it was practically Spain, Americans. Well, when I say Americans, the new settlers that of course came from Britain, which really they were both British anyways. The settlers were British. That's just the point I'm trying to make. So it was just the Spanish, the Americans versus the British, the English. So, to claim the land of Florida as well. So let's see. It says later, under President Andrew Jackson, the United States committed some of the greatest atrocities in the nation's history. And we're going to read about this mega demon of whom was used to really, he was the one who of whom was trying to claim, the Seminole Indians' land, over there in Florida. And we're going to read into it. So during this time, Jackson was merely an ill-tempered member of the military, but it showed just how cruel and savage the man was before the people elected him to the presidency. So he had the military background, and of course he had those Edomite traits, being a wicked man, cruel and savage. And they're calling Gad savages. Really, Edomites are the real savages. So, disregarding the fact that Spain had helped the country to beat the British, Americans continued to invade Florida under the claim that they were trying to get their slaves back. While some were trying to find their slaves, the fact that they didn't leave Florida proved that this was nothing more than an excuse for aggression. The actual goal was to steal the land from Spain. So again, these heathens, specifically Edomites, of course, as they come here to invade the land, they were fighting amongst themselves in order to take the land from Jake, which is really what this series is about anyways, the Native American history, and as I go through the chapters. So read the main chapters that ought to be brought out. So in 1821, America was finally successful in driving the people who had been their allies during the country founding the land from the Spanish had held before most of the colonies existed. Of course, the natives were the only ones with a legitimate claim. You see, that's why it's supposed to be there for the land of Gad, and Reuben, man, as well as the other northern tribes as well. That was really their lands that the Most High gave them. For that temporary time, of course. That only Europeans, but based on the limited view that only Europeans and people who followed the European God had a right to the land. So of course they were pushing the idol, Christianity, the idol, Jesus Christ, that idol there, and pretty much trying to force Jake to worship these idols, man. So they would always have an excuse to steal lands and potential resources from enemies and allies alike. So what followed was a series of wars with the Seminoles, who did not recognize the US as a new owner of their lands. So yeah, man, that was the third. That's referring to the first, the second, and the third Seminole War. So let me get to the point here. I just want to get some key paragraphs here. Just hold on. Alright, hold on. Alright, so I'll read this one. This is on page 89, that paragraph. Having successfully fought off the Spanish for the entirety of their occupation in Florida, the Seminoles considered themselves a free people. When the US tried to force them off of their lands, as the country was attempting with all natives, regardless of treaties, alliances, and the Cherokee, later proved against the rulings of the U.S. Supreme Court. So Cherokee, one of the tribes of the Native American Indians. I think they were part of the Cherokee, part of the Seminole Nation, which the Seminole Nation is just a reference to the different tribes within the Seminole Indians. So different tribes within Reuben. Let me just search up something. I need to check if Cherokee is actually Seminole. But Cherokee parts of the Seminole Nation. Seminole Nation. Alright, so they weren't. It says no, the Cherokee were not part of the Seminole Nation. Instead, they were separate and distinct tribes that were both categorized as members of the 5 civilized tribes. And it's just going into something else, but hold on. Okay. So it says here, the Seminole people formed in Florida from various Muskogee Creek groups and other Native American peoples and escaped African Americans, while the Cherokee were a distinct people who developed their own nation. Yeah, man, so there was a lot going on there. And when I say there was a lot going on there, because, it says Native American peoples and escaped African Americans, man. So, that's how certain of the tribe, even during bondage, were intermingling too. That was just from me searching up were the Cherokee part of the Seminole Nation. And that's what the AI overview says. So they were separate, man. Seminole Nation was different to Cherokee, which, all in all, they were all Native Americans. But scripturally speaking, the Seminole Indians are Reuben, and then Native American Indians, the rest of the Native American Indians are Gad. Alright, let's continue. Right, so as the Cherokee later proved against the rulings of the U.S. Supreme Court, the Seminoles resisted. Jackson had miscalculated in his attempt to solve what he called the Indian problem. The countries that traded with the US were very much opposed to his clearly immoral and barbaric practices. Because of course he's an Edomite, he's gonna show his horns, man, when it comes to claiming those lands. As a result of the international world condemning his actions, Jackson felt justified any killing of those who opposed his policies. This included 2 Englishmen that Jackson suspected of inciting the native peoples to fight, something that the Seminole clearly did not need any outside incentive to do. So of course, Jackson, President Andrew Jackson, during that time of the first Seminole War, of course, when he was ruling here, he was a ruthless leader, as it says here. It says Jackson felt justified any killing of those who opposed his policy. So, he was like a cruel lord, man. As it says within the scriptures, the Most High bring a cruel lord. Of course, we know that's Donald Trump. When we get to Isaiah 19 and 14, let me just get it quickly. In fact, let me get that, then I'll get some few precepts here as well. Because Andrew Jackson, he was a straight up demon, man. Of course, this is according to the writings of the book. But yeah, man, of course, when there's an Edomite that's in rule, the horns will show eventually. So the scriptures say, never trust thine enemy. Actually, hold on. Let me check. Okay. So Jackson Fortress, but any king process. Yeah, it's either his way or it was the highway, man. I forgot there was actually a piece I was gonna get. Hold on. Let me get this one first. Let me get over there. Oh, I thought they were shy. Sometimes the mind goes slow, man. I was thinking, what precept was I gonna get there? I think I'm going to Obadiah, but prior to Obadiah, there's another precept. Alright, so Isaiah 19 and verse 4. So hold on. This is Isaiah 19 and verse. Hold on. Yeah, Isaiah 19 and verse 4. And the Egyptians will I give over into the hand of a cruel lord, and a fierce king shall rule over them, saith the Lord Yahweh, the Lord of hosts. So, of course, that cruel lord is referring to, well, first of all, the Egyptians are referring to the modern day Americans. And that cruel lord is reference to Donald Trump. You know, it's only a matter of time before people are going to be, really, people are already seeing what he's doing, man. You know, the ICE deportations, you know, Washington, D.C. with Salvin Tribe being arrested as well. You know, so really the horns are being revealed, you know, in a gradual sense, and up to the point where the MTV comes out, where it's just going to be getting stricter, and stricter. You know, those are decrees, those wicked decrees will be made. So I'm going to get this as well. Just hold on. Because Esau's wickedness goes deep, man. Their rulers are evil. It's all about the Edomite rulers. Of course, we're reading about one right now, you know, President Andrew Jackson. Yeah, so... this is Obadiah 1 and verse 8 to 10. Yeah, verse 8 to 10. Obadiah 1 verse 8. Shall I not in that day, save the Lord Yahweh, even destroy the wise men out of Edom, and his understanding out of the mount of Esau, and thy mighty men, O Teman, shall be dismayed, to the end that every one of the mounts of Esau may be cut off by slaughter. For thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. You see, so, you know, Esau's going to get that destruction soon. As it says, it shall I not in that day, save the Lord Yahweh, even destroy the wise men out of Eden, and understanding out of the mouth of Esau. So whatever Esau tries to do, you know, he's just going to be failing. You know, even it says in Isaiah 19 and verse 14. Hold on. Isaiah 19 and verse 14 about him. All the works of Egypt will be erroneous. Will err. That's the word. Alright, let me go here. So this is Isaiah. Hold on. Let's go get that chapter again. This is Isaiah 19 and verse 14. It should be 14. Yeah. Isaiah 19 and 14. The Lord hath mingled a perverse spirit in the midst thereof, and they have caused Egypt to err to make mistakes, to be faulty in every work thereof, as a drunken man staggereth in his vomit. So that's why in hold on. In Obadiah here. I'm gonna get back to Obadiah. In Obadiah here, it talks about just hold on up here. Hold on, so up here. So Obadiah 1 and verse 10, no, not 10. In verse 8, shall I not in that day, saith the Lord Yahweh, even destroy the wise men out of Edom and understanding out of the mouth of Esau? Yeah. That's why the Most High is going to remove, from the understanding removed, Esau is going to be in that destroyed state of mind, that destroyed state of mind. As it says in verse 10, for thy violence against thy brother Jacob, shame shall cover thee, and thou shalt be cut off forever. So that's Esau's punishment, man. Because, Andrew Jackson, again, another example of those Edomites that have shown violence towards Jacob, of course, specifically northern tribe over there, Gad and Reuben, but of course, Reuben more so in this video. Esau's going to get that punishment, man, of being cut off forever. And that's why in the kingdom of Yahushua, after they've done their servitude of slavery for 1,000 years, then they're going to be cut off. And of course, there will be no such thing as the nation of Edom anymore. All right, let's continue here. Let's see. All right, ain't doing too bad for time. Okay, so all right, miscalculated, Jackson justified. So it says the countries that traded with the U.S. were very much opposed to his clearly immoral and barbaric practices. As a result of the international world condemning his actions, Jackson felt justified any killing of those who opposed his policies. This included 2 Englishmen that Jackson suspected of inciting the native peoples to fight. Something that the Seminole clearly did not need any outside incentive to do. This period is known as the First Seminole War because clashes occurred frequently and Florida was constantly erupting into bloody battles. The first war lasted from 1814 to 1818, man. So really, this is based upon just Edomites giving Jake a hard time, man. It's like kind of like a free-for-all between the Spanish, the American settlers, and the English to claim the lands. Let's see. All right, I'll read this. It says by 1830, Jackson had unfortunately been voted into the powerful position of president of the U.S., where he was very abusive of his powers. Actually, hold on. This might be something else too. All right, yeah. Let me read this upper paragraph first. Hold on. My eyes missed this. So, in a misguided and ill thought out attempt to gain Florida through one of their fake treaties, that I mentioned in the previous video as well, Esau did do a lot of treaties with Gad, and Reuben, but he never stuck to them because he saw Jake as a base. Esau saw Jake as baseman when the actual baseman is himself. Remember, scriptures talk about him being a baseman. I'm gonna get another precept soon as well. So this is it says in a misguided and ill thought out attempt to gain Florida through one of their fake treaties, the U.S. tried to persuade the growing number of native people in Florida to leave. The Muskogee were only one of the many tribes and nations who opted to leave Florida instead of going west. They tried to convince the people to sell their cattle and return slaves, two things that clearly would weaken the natives, which they weren't willing to do. By 1830, so of course, certain things that Esau did um, got Gad, to leave, or certain tribes of, the Native American Indians to leave. But the Seminole Indians, as we read before, they stood their ground. Some stayed in the land, some left. Read by the third Seminole War, that's when they left. But let's get this. Let's get this. All right. So return. It says here they tried to convince the people to sell their cattle and return slaves. Two things that clearly would weaken the natives, which they weren't willing to do. All right. Let's get to another point here. Actually, this was something as well. By 1830, Jackson had unfortunately been vaulted into the powerful position of President of the US, where he was very abusive of his powers, being a straight Edomite demon, even when people within the US decreed his cruelty towards natives, particularly those who lived near Native Americans and valued their long-established partnerships. He ignored them, bent on forcing the native peoples to resettle in regions where he didn't think there were adequate resources. That's how you know Andrew Jackson was a demon, man. He was forcing Jake to go away from Florida, where there were more resources, into less profitable land in terms of its resources, where you can harvest from the land. So that was a very unfair move from Andrew Jackson there, which is not too surprising considering he's an Edomite. So Jackson started taking on the more difficult native peoples, most notably the Cherokee and the Seminole nations. Cherokee may have been Reuben as well, considering how they are right now. Well, considering what I'm reading right now. So most notably, the Cherokee and Seminole nations, the Cherokee chose to fight through the U.S. court system, a move that he had not anticipated. Since, you see, Jake ain't simple, man. Jake still got the intelligence. So, and Esau's problem is underestimating Jake. The Cherokee chose to fight through the U.S. court systems, a move that he had not anticipated since the U.S. courts found in favor of the Cherokees. Jackson decided to ignore that particular branch of the US government and continued with his now illegal actions. The actions were illegal as he was now acting against the law of the land and acting more as a dictator than a president, you see. All right, let's see. Let's get to another point. All right. Now it says here, however, the Seminole did not know the court systems as well as the Cherokee. Having spent decades fighting the US instead of working alongside them, their complete lack of trust for the United States government that seemed to only make treaties to break them proved to be the more successful path. Not trusting in your enemy. So although the fighting did not stop after 1818, the advances of the now President Jackson in the Seminole territory began a much larger stint of violence. Beginning in 1835, the fighting intensified and is called the Second Seminole War. So again, this was the second one, man. Let's see what it says here. So it says, as the Spanish had found before them, the United States realized that the Seminole were not nearly as easy to remove as the other natives the United States had pushed off of their lands. For the next 7 years, Jackson would spend roughly $40 million in an attempt to kick the native peoples off of their lands, while the other Native American removals required only the use of an army to execute the heinous policy. Jackson had to send in the U.S. Army Navy, and the Marine Corps in an attempt to remove the Seminole. Imagine that though. For the rest, all you require was just the army. And then for Seminole Indians, for Reuben, Andrew Jackson needed to send the U.S. Army, the Navy, and the Marine Corps just for Reuben. Again, Genesis 49 already proves that, man. He is the excellency of power. He holds the power of excellency. Let me try to get it one more time as well. This is Genesis 49 and verse 3. Reuben, thou art my firstborn, my might, and the beginning of my strength, the excellency of dignity, and the excellency of power, the pinnacle of power. So, yeah, man, Reuben's known to be strong. Reuben's known to have that power, to be the battle-ready tribe. Right, so, yeah, man. So, next part, this is the third one. Also, like the Spanish, the U.S. failed. The Third Seminole War was the only one where the U.S. was able to claim a level of success. The primary leader of the Seminole Nation agreed to leave. You see, so they got to him. And they got to the leader of the Seminole Nation, you can say the leader of Reuben, at that time. So many of his people went with him to new, largely inhospitable lands. You see, so they pushed them to another land. Despite this, it says, many Seminole died, and others were forced onto ships and taken up the Mississippi River for relocation. Those who were forced to the new lands ended up in new battles with the other displaced natives because there were not adequate resources for everyone on the barren plots of land that the U.S. had designated for them. So it was a harsh thing that Reuben had to go through, man. But they didn't want to tolerate the bullshit from these Edomites. They knew that it's fake treaties. Esau's just gonna break it. Reuben's like, yeah, you can't trust them. Can't trust them at all. So this is Jeremiah. Actually, before I get Jeremiah, Habakkuk 2 and start from verse 3. For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. And that vision is also referring to the prophecies within this scripture. Esau, Edom, as we mentioned over there, 1, from verse 8 to verse 10, about Esau being destroyed as well, and his understanding being removed from him. All of that is coming to pass, man. And you already know from the downfall of his society, which is seen through the economy and just via societal means, people's interactions with each other, which is all going back to prophecy as well. The love of many shall wax cold. Esau's being used to also speed up that as well. So, yeah, man. So that in Habakkuk 2 and 3, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, that's referring to the scriptures and the prophecies within the scriptures. So verse 4, behold his soul, I'll read verse 3 again, then verse 4. So Habakkuk 2 and 3, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it shall speak and not lie, so it means it will happen. Though it tarry, wait for it, because it will surely come. It will not tarry. Behold, his soul which is lifted up is not upright in him, but the just shall live by faith. So yeah, the point is, Yahweh Shem will increase our faith, as we're going through our trials as well, to help increase our faith, to be rooted, to make our trust rooted in him, in Yahweh Shem Yahushua. And of course, the unjust, they're going to get their lot as well, in terms of a wicked reward. So it says, behold, the soul which is lifted up, in pride, Esau's got a lot of pride, is not upright in him. But the just shall live by faith. Yea, also because he transgresseth by wine, he is a proud man, neither keepeth at home, who enlargeth his desire as hell, and is as death and cannot be satisfied, but gathereth unto him all nations and heapeth unto him all people. And he really did that with the Native American Indians, man. Of course, we're focusing more on Reuben, the Seminole nation, the Seminole tribe. With what Esau did, man. Of course, the predominant Edomite that was responsible for those wars was really Andrew Jackson, man. First, second, and then the third as well, I believe. So yeah, man, all of that there shows the wickedness of Esau Edom. Who enlargeth his desire. So yeah, he desired those lands. That's why it came from Britain to America, or from the Spain to America, and then he claimed the land of Gad and Reuben, man, as well as the rest of the northern tribe too. Alright, so let me get this. I'm gonna get this precept, I'm gonna close it out. So Jeremiah 49 and verse 15 to about verse 17. Jeremiah 49 and 15. For lo, I will make thee, he's talking about Esau Edom, by the way. I'll make thee small among the heathen and despised among men. So of course other heathen nations are also going to hate Esau as well, because of his wrongdoings, his wickedness. So verse 16, thy terribleness hath deceived thee, and the pride of thine heart, O thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock. The origins of Esau into the caves, came from the caves. That holdest the height of the hill, though thou shouldest make thy nest as high as the eagle, I will bring thee down from thence, saith the Lord Yahweh. So of course, where it says, though thou shouldest make thy nest as high as the eagle, of course, Esau has a temporary or a weak state of rule over the skies as well. And again, they got their space stations. I think there were also videos on YouTube on Esau wanted to create space hotels as well. So despite that, he ain't gonna achieve that, but through Yahweh Shem Yahshua, he will be brought down. That's the point. Or even if he does get a glimmer of that, it's only going to be temporary, man. It's only going to be temporary, or a small thing. So yeah, so verse 17 now. Also Edom shall be a desolation, every one that goeth by it shall be astonished, and shall hiss at all the plagues thereof. So he will be punished, he will be destroyed. Esau Edom, man. All the wrongdoings that are done upon Jake, it's going to be a wrap for him. It's going to be a wrap for him. So yeah, skipping on to the ending of the chapter. Today, roughly 3,500 Seminole still live on their lands in Florida. Some descended from the people who never left. Others are descended from people who made their way back to Florida while the U.S. engaged in illegal wars with other native peoples further west. So the wickedness was still going on, man. But nevertheless, Yaratazar, he found it edifying, and this has helped to actually build up your knowledge on the Seminole Indians. And a certain officer did a video recently on that too. But yeah, man, Yaratazar, that he found it edifying. Again, Native American history book by Captivating History, as you can see here. If you want to order it from Amazon, it should be there. And yeah, Shalom, Yabashim Shabrakatha, Kahalarim La Yabashim Shabashim Kakudash, and double honors to the Apostles. Shalom.